Hi guys, so here we are in our next. This is for section 2.1, all about atoms, ions, and molecules. Now this is going to give you a little overview on and a refresher on these things, and then we're going to move into studying some actual molecules that have to do with biology. So for this section, our key concept is all living things are based on their atoms and their interactions. Some vocabulary: we have atom, element, compound, ion, ionic bond, covalent bond, and molecule. Hopefully these are all things that you kind of remember, at least some of them you should remember. And then again, we're going to define these as we go through. Our main ideas are living things consist of atoms of different elements. Ions form when atoms gain or lose electrons, and atoms share pairs of electrons in covalent bonds. Our essential questions: how are elements different from compounds? And what is the difference between ionic and covalent bonds? All right, so like I was saying, this is just some overview. This is the vocabulary. Hopefully these are words that are familiar to you. So living things consist of atoms of different elements. So an atom is the smallest basic unit of all matter. And then along with atoms, we can have atoms that belong to specific elements. So an element is one particular type of atom that cannot be broken down into a simpler substance. And you can find all the elements that have been discovered so far in the periodic table, and you've all seen that in the past as well. Now, atoms are made out of other particles, and I want you in your head to right now think about the particles that make up an atom. So here are those particles. So an atom has a nucleus and is surrounded by electrons. So the nucleus, which is the middle part of an atom, contains the protons and the neutrons. And then we have the electrons, which are flying around the nucleus in different electron levels called electron shells. Sometimes we call them electron clouds as well. Now, if you remember atoms, again, we have some of these particles are positively charged, some are negatively charged, and some are neutral. So I want you to think in your head, which one is the negatively charged particle? Hopefully you can remember. Which one is the positively charged particle? And then which one is the neutrally charged particle? Well, neutral charge. So if you thought proton, positive, P for positive, neutron, neutral, and then electrons are negatively charged. So a compound is made of atoms of different elements bonded together. So for example, we have water, which is two different kinds of atoms. We have hydrogen and oxygen, so H2O. And then carbon dioxide is another example. Carbon dioxide is made of carbon and oxygen bonded together. And a lot of times these are completely different than the properties of the element that make up the compound. And a compound is made of atoms of different, oh, sorry, I did that already. Okay, so ions form when atoms gain or lose electrons. And so ions are a special type of compound. And so sometimes when atoms get together, they will either gain electrons or lose electrons. And those electrons cause the particle to become either positively charged or negatively charged, because an atom is neutral because it has the same amount of protons as electrons. So if it's going to give away an electron or gain an electron, it's going to change the charge of that atom. So an ion is an atom that has gained or lost one or more electron. And I like to think that ion starts with an I, because I'm going to take or I'm going to give an electron. Okay, so we have positive ions and negative ions. And an ionic bond forms through the electrical force between oppositely charged ions. So I've got a picture down here. This is a commonly charged ionic bonded compound. This is sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is known as salt. And in sodium chloride, we have our sodium atom that bonds to a chlorine atom. And when sodium bonds to chlorine, the sodium actually loses an electron to chlorine, which makes it become positive. So the sodium becomes positively charged. And then because the chlorine is gaining an electron, it's becoming negatively charged because electrons have a negative charge, so it has an extra negative. Okay, so it becomes an ionically bonded compound. So atoms also share pairs of electrons in these things called covalent bonds. And I like to remember covalent because covalent cooperate. They share electrons. Ionic, I'm going to give away or I'm going to take. So covalent cooperate. So they form when atoms share a bond of electrons, and covalent bonds are generally very, very, very strong. They're hard to break. And a molecule is two or more atoms held together by a covalent bond. So we can talk about like a water molecule or a carbon dioxide molecule because these are all compounds that are held together by covalent bonds. So please, that is the end. It was just a little overview because we're going to get into our next section on water. But I would like you to go back and try to answer those essential questions in your notes. So how are elements different from compounds? And then what is the difference between ionic and covalent bonds? If you can't do that, go back and listen to me because I do tell you those differences in the PowerPoint. All right, guys, have a great day.